Swindon, 3:47 a.m. The town was quiet. No one knew that in a few seconds a phone would ring, a 6-word text message that would set off an irreversible chain reaction. They know. Run. Too late. No sirens, no flashing lights, just silent figures moving like ghosts in the night, closing in on a house while everything inside was still asleep. A heavy breath, an unfinished dream, and then a knock on the door without waiting for an answer. 6 hours later, somewhere else, a woman cried at the interrogation table, her eyes blurred with uncertainty as to what had really begun or ended. A silver supercar was quietly pulled out of the garage. No one in the neighborhood dared to ask. But this was no ordinary arrest, not just a dealer caught. This is the beginning of a journey that will reveal something bigger, deeper, and more sophisticated than anyone could have imagined. A network that has crept through quiet villages disguised by smiles, suits, and the silence of neighbors. The question is not what happened, but how it was able to go on for so long without anyone noticing. In this story, it is only just beginning. Warren Allison, at 32, was not the type of man anyone would take notice of. His eyes were piercing, his hair was neatly cropped, his bearing was confident, but not pretentious. There was something about him that either made people believe him or didn't see through him. He never talked much, he just acted. And that's where things started to get dangerous. No one suspected that behind that placid exterior was a mind that calculated every gram of cocaine, every cross-border money transfer, every trusted intermediary like a chess piece in his hand. But Warren wasn't alone. His brother, Kelroy Allison, was the complete opposite. Quiet, rarely seen in public, but when he spoke, every word was an order. If Warren was the dreamer, Kelroy was the one who framed it with cold discipline and strategy. The brothers weren't roaming the streets peddling bags of cocaine. They were direct links to an Albanian crime syndicate that controlled the flow of cocaine from South America to Europe, as if it were a multinational shipping company. To pull off their plan, they needed people who wouldn't ask questions, and they got Richard Cowell, a middle-aged Freshbrook driver who everyone thought was a postman, but who actually drove modified cars with hidden compartments, more elaborate than spy movies. And finally, there was Portia Denley, Warren's lover, a scantily clad brunette who had been a banker turned shadow CFO, managing every flow of dirty money into clean assets. This wasn't a gang, it was a shadowy corporation, and it was run as if it had been for generations. Warren Allison never dreamed of being a clandestine dealer who ran in the dark. He dreamed of power, the kind that people bowed their heads and dared not question. There was no turf war, no cold-blooded feud or gangland-tinged betrayal. It all started with a desire not to accept a mediocre life. While his neighbors went to work in the morning and gathered for tea in the evening, Warren and his brother Kelroy quietly designed a sophisticated operation that would make any legitimate business jealous. Not a criminal organization, but a complete logistics model. From supply through Albanian links to a money laundering system optimized like an underground bank, distributed regionally like a supermarket chain. They communicated not with regular phones, but with Sky ECC, a military-grade encryption platform designed specifically for the world of organized crime. Every text message is a metaphor. Every meeting is coded as a conversation about fashion or business. They are merchants to outsiders, but inside the system, they are kingpins operating millions of pounds of cocaine across borders. What makes their networks dangerous is not just the volume of their cargo, but the way they disappear from the world's view, legitimizing every pound, every transaction, every transfer, like a multinational corporation with no offices or signboards. No one is forced into this. No one is in it out of poverty. Everyone is in it by choice, believing they are smart enough to game the system and discreet enough never to be found. But greed, like any criminal empire, is the crack that starts from within. In early 2020, as the Allison brothers' underground empire spread like a network of underground routes across Wiltshire, reaching into Bristol, into the dark corners of London, and stretching its tentacles back to Albania, it seemed unstoppable. The goods moved from South America through European ports, delivered regularly and without error. The cash moved smoothly, laundered through layers of intermediaries designed to make it impossible to trace. Even the communications equipment was not just phones. It was the Sky ECC encryption system, used by only the most sophisticated criminal networks. But then, in the smugness of those who thought themselves invisible, a 400,000-pound transaction in Bristol became an unexpected breaking point. There was no gunfire, no chase, just a Tesco life canvas bag changing hands on a quiet pavement. The courier, a seemingly ordinary middleman. The recipient, Anthony Burke, Allison's cousin, the city's distributor. The transaction lasted only a few seconds. No one saw anything unusual, but what no one knew was that the surrounding cameras had been installed weeks before, the suspects' phones had been tapped, and the seemingly innocuous exchange was actually the fateful moment the police had been waiting for 4 years. Inside the duffel bag were several packets of cocaine of near-perfect purity, enough to feed the Bristol market for months. The moment the bags changed hands, orders were given over the intercom. Unmarked police cars sped up. Anthony was subdued just a few yards after turning to leave. He had no time to react, no time to dispose of anything. The police had left no stone unturned. And what made this case more important than any previous deal was the way it had been staged. Because for the first time, they had living evidence. A link was caught red-handed with irrefutable evidence. That very night, the system was activated. Raids took place simultaneously in Swindon, Hilberton, Milksham, London. Every house was broken into with precision. Every door was flung open in the darkness. Every key member of the network was arrested almost simultaneously. No one had time to raise the alarm. A Tesco life bag, the most ordinary item in the land of fog, became the key to unlocking the gateway to darkness that the Allison brothers had been building for nearly half a decade. It didn't start with a murder, a thrilling chase, or a secret stash of goods. It started with a neighbor's raised eyebrow. They didn't know exactly what had made them suspicious. It could have been the sound of a Lamborghini engine at dawn. It could have been the strange men who kept appearing for a few minutes and then disappearing as if they had never been there. Or it could have been Warren's eyes, always too cold, too calm for someone who was just a middle-class resident. But whatever the reason, a call was made. And from there, a slow but inexorable investigative machine was set into motion. The Wiltshire police began to quietly observe, initially with a visual surveillance, taking note of license plates, driving patterns, who came and went. Gradually, the suspicions became clearer. Warren and Kelroy Allison lived like the elite. Fast cars, expensive watches, international vacations. But there was no legitimate source of income that could justify that lifestyle. From there, the spearheads were deployed. Tax records, traffic patterns, bank records, financial transactions. Everything was uncovered. But what surprised them most was the level of secrecy with which the brothers operated. There were no clear phone calls, no straight-up text messages. Everything was encrypted using a telecommunication system called Sky ECC, a system that even Europe's top investigative agencies had previously failed to defeat. Every conversation was peppered with nicknames, metaphors, and slang. Terms like Italian shoes, Swiss watches, and imported duffel were actually references to white goods, cash, and deliveries. With all the high-end security equipment, they were confident that no one would be able to touch their system. But that arrogance was also their fatal weakness. In March 2020, an unprecedented breakthrough occurred in the European investigative world. The Sky ECC system was officially cracked. Millions of messages that had been buried in complex layers of encryption were now clearly visible to analysts. Seemingly meaningless conversations suddenly had context. Each transaction, each instruction, each transfer was pieced together into a complete picture. Everything that had been just suspicion was now evidence. And with the cooperation of forces from the UK, Belgium, Albania, the Netherlands, and even Interpol, a system was built. Who shipped, who received, who laundered the money, who commanded from afar. From the suspicious gaze of an anonymous neighbor, the police traced an underground empire more sophisticated than anything Wiltshire had ever seen. And in the middle of that picture, there are still Warren and Kelroy, sitting peacefully in the quiet villa, completely unaware that the storm has begun to rise from a very light wind. Dawn had barely brightened the skies over Swindon when the front door of Warren Allison's mansion was smashed open by a team of masked, heavily armed commandos. The action was captured in vivid detail on CCTV cameras hidden throughout the neighborhood. The man, barely conscious, pinned to the floor next to a mattress concealed in cash. In Hilberton, Bristol, Wiltshire, Freshbrook, other doors were smashed in unison in a series of simultaneous, decisive blows. Kelroy was dragged from his house in his ash-gray pajamas. Richard Cowell, the loyal chauffeur, was arrested as he opened the boot of his custom-built car. Portia Denley, the woman who controlled the finances, was subdued outside the offices of the shell company where she had laundered millions of pounds. The evidence had been laid out months in advance. Bank accounts, car receipts, secretly filmed deliveries, chemicals to verify the purity of the cocaine, and, the final blow, thousands of decrypted messages from the Sky ECC system. The silence was deafening as the judge delivered his verdict in Winchester, which lasted 12 weeks. The defense that they were only dealing in counterfeit goods, fake Gucci's, fake watches, was torn apart word for word. CCTV footage was played, Richard opening a secret compartment in his car, Portia withdrawing money from an ATM and entering a bank office. Messages like Armani order coming soon and Colombian bride's wedding were now understood to be code words for cocaine and delivery points. With no room for argument, the jury sentenced the entire gang to more than 82 years in prison. Warren got 23, Kelroy 16, Richard 9, Portia 8, Anthony Burke 8. Even the Albanian suppliers who had escaped were hunted down by Interpol and extradited to Britain. An empire built on the confidence of its invisibility, now exposed by the cold, unscrupulous cameras. A £7 million cocaine empire collapsed amid the crack of handcuffs in the early morning and police lights sweeping through a mansion that had once been a symbol of underground power. Lamborghinis, Mercedes, Audis, now gathering dust in the impound lot, every pound of blood and drug money seized as evidence of a crime done. Warren Allison, who once believed that encryption and money could make him invulnerable, now counts his days behind bars. But what resonates more deeply behind the sentence is the fragility of every facade. Without a suspicious look from a neighbor, without someone questioning a car that didn't match his salary, would anyone have ever discovered a network that ran like a business, running across countries? Organized crime doesn't hide in the wild. It lives among us, in ordinary homes, among friendly smiles. So what do you think? Has justice been served, or was it just a lucky break? Please comment, share videos, and follow Crime Scene Chronicles, where truth is always more surprising than fiction.